You have 5 minutes to shut that pump off, or I'm calling the police for grand theft water. The voice was a shriek, a sound that could curdle milk and crack pavement. It belonged, of course, to Brenda. I didn't even turn around. I just kept my eyes on the steady, gurgling flow of water pouring into my pond, my beautiful, beleaguered pond. Her pool water, to be exact. This whole saga wasn't about water, not really. It was about a woman who thought rules were for other people, and a man who just wanted to be left alone with his memories. She picked the wrong man. I'm a civil engineer. I understand flow, pressure, and the unyielding laws of physics. More importantly, I understand the unyielding power of meticulously documented, legally executed revenge. If you're a fan of seeing a bully get exactly what they deserve, stick around. This story is for you. What would you do if your neighbor tried to destroy the one thing you had left of a loved one? Let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. My story starts not with a bang, but with the gentle trickle of a waterfall. After my wife, Elena, passed away, the house felt like an empty hangar. The silence was deafening, a constant reminder of the vibrant noise that used to fill it. The only place I found any solace was in the backyard, beside the koi pond she had designed. It wasn't just a hole in the ground with some fish. It was an ecosystem, a perfect, self-sustaining loop of life she had spent years balancing. Water hyacinths floated on the surface, their roots filtering the water. A small, solar-powered pump circulated it through a bed of gravel and charcoal before it cascaded down a small rock formation she'd built by hand. The koi, iridescent jewels of orange and white, were her pride and joy. They were a living testament to her patience and her love for creating beauty. I'd sit out there for hours, watching the fish glide through the clear water, the sound of the waterfall a gentle balm on my grief. It was Elena's legacy, a piece of her soul still alive in our garden. I was its caretaker, its guardian. It was the most important job I had left. We lived in a community called Willow Creek Estates, which sounded lovely and bucolic but was, in reality, a tightly wound knot of bylaws and covenants policed by a homeowners association. And the Grand Inquisitor of this HOA was Brenda. Brenda was the HOA president, a title she wore like a monarch's crown. She was a woman whose entire sense of self-worth seemed to be derived from the power she wielded over her neighbors' mailboxes, lawn heights, and trash can placements. She would patrol the streets in her golf cart, a clipboard resting on the passenger seat, her eyes scanning for infractions with the intensity of a predator searching for a weak gazelle. Our interactions had been minimal up to that point. A curt nod here, a forced smile there. I kept to myself, paid my dues on time, and kept my property immaculate. I was what you'd call a model resident. I was quiet, grieving, and wanted nothing more than to be left in peace. That, it turned out, was my primary offense in her eyes. Peace is boring. Peace doesn't give you a reason to assert your authority. The first salvo came in the form of a crisp, white envelope taped to my front door. It wasn't from the postman, it was hand-delivered, an act of personal intimidation. Inside, printed on official HOA letterhead, was a notice of violation. Violation, unapproved water feature, koi pond, it read. Remedy, drain and fill the feature within 30 days. Fine, $50. I stared at the paper, a cold annoyance prickling my skin. The pond had been there for nearly a decade. It predated the current iteration of the HOA's architectural guidelines by several years. It was, in legal terms, grandfathered in. I found Brenda making her rounds later that day, peering critically at the miller's rose bushes. I approached her calmly, the letter in my hand. Brenda, I think there's been a mistake, I said, keeping my voice even. She turned, a saccharine smile plastered on her face that didn't reach her cold, calculating eyes. Mark, isn't it? I don't make mistakes when it comes to the community's aesthetic integrity. The pond has been here for 10 years, I explained patiently. It was here long before the rule about approved water features was even written. It's grandfathered in. The bylaws state that all properties must be in compliance, she sniffed, tapping a perfectly manicured finger on her ever-present clipboard. We can't have stagnant, mosquito-infested swamps in Willow Creek. It lowers property values. My jaw tightened. It's a fully filtered, moving ecosystem, not a swamp. The fish eat any mosquito larvae. It's cleaner than your bird bath. Her smile tightened, becoming a thin, sharp line. The board has decided. The notice stands. If you have an issue, you can appeal at the next monthly meeting. 30 days, Mark. She turned and zipped away in her golf cart, leaving me standing on the sidewalk, the ridiculous piece of paper feeling heavier in my hand. This wasn't about mosquitoes or property values. This was a power play. It was the opening move in a game I had no desire to play. I spent that evening digging through the mountain of HOA documents I'd been given when we bought the house. I found what I was looking for, the clause stating that any structures existing prior to the 2015 bylaw amendments were exempt from the new architectural rules. My pond, built in 2012, was safe. I felt a small sense of relief. Logic and facts were on my side. I would present this at the meeting, she would be corrected, and this nonsense would be over. How naive I was. I was trying to play chess with a person who preferred to just knock over the board. The HOA meeting was a masterclass in petty tyranny. It was held in the community clubhouse, a sterile room that smelled of air freshener and resentment. Brenda sat at the head of a long table, flanked by 2 other board members who looked about as thrilled to be there as hostages. When my turn came, I calmly presented my case. I showed the date of the pond's construction on the original landscaper's invoice. I read the grandfather clause from the bylaws aloud. I even brought photos of the vibrant, healthy koi and the crystal clear water. As you can see, I concluded, the pond is not in violation. It's a pre-existing, well-maintained feature of my property. Brenda listened with a look of profound boredom. When I finished, she didn't even look at my evidence. "Thank you for your presentation, Mark," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. However, the board also has the authority to declare any feature a nuisance if it poses a health or safety risk. And a large body of standing water is a risk. Motion to deny the appeal. One of the board members mumbled, "Second." Motion carried, Brenda declared, banging a small gavel with theatrical force. The violation stands. You now have 28 days. The room was silent. A few of my neighbors shot me sympathetic looks, but no one spoke up. They knew the price of crossing Brenda. I felt a surge of hot, frustrated anger. She hadn't just ignored the facts, she had twisted the rules to fit her whim. She had made it personal. This was no longer a misunderstanding. It was a targeted attack. I walked out of that clubhouse feeling a shift inside me. The peaceful, grieving man who just wanted to be left alone was starting to recede. In his place, the engineer was waking up, the man who saw problems not as obstacles, but as complex equations waiting to be solved. And Brenda had just become my most interesting project. The fines started piling up. Every week, a new envelope was taped to my door. $50 became $100. $100 became $200, plus late fees. She was trying to bleed me out, to make compliance the cheaper, easier option. Then she escalated. She started a campaign of public shaming. In the community newsletter, under a section titled, Community Standards, she wrote a thinly veiled article about unsightly and hazardous yard features that attract pests and endanger children. She didn't use my name, but everyone knew who she was talking about. People started to avoid my gaze when I checked the mail. The friendly waves from neighbors became hesitant and brief. She was isolating me, painting me as the problem neighbor, the one who refused to be a team player. The pressure was building, a slow, steady compression. I was documenting everything, every letter, every fine, every newsletter article. I started a file, a thick folder that was growing heavier by the day. But documentation wasn't enough. This was an active siege, and I was losing ground. The turning point, the moment the game changed for good, came on a Thursday afternoon. I had to go into the city for a consultation on a municipal drainage project, and I was gone longer than expected. When I pulled into my driveway just before dusk, something felt wrong. It was a sound, or rather, the lack of one. The gentle music of the waterfall was gone. A cold dread washed over me. I vaulted from the car and ran into the backyard. And then I saw it. A thick, black hose snaked its way from the edge of my pond, across my lawn, and under the fence into Brenda's yard. It was connected to a sump pump, its ugly orange body submerged in the water, chugging away relentlessly. My pond, Elena's pond, was being drained. The water level was already down by at least a foot. The top tier of the rock waterfall was completely exposed, dry and barren. The water hyacinths were clustered together in the shrinking pool, their roots dangling in the air. The koi were swimming anxiously in the shallow water, their fins occasionally breaking the surface. They were stressed, panicked. I looked over the fence. In Brenda's yard, a team of landscapers was working on a massive new patio and garden installation. And my water, my pond's lifeblood, was being spewed out of the hose to soften the hard, dry ground for their digging. She wasn't just fining me. She wasn't just shaming me. She was actively destroying the one thing I had left of my wife, and she was using it to water her new flower beds. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud, explosive break, but a quiet, cold fracture. The grief and the frustration and the anger coalesced into a single, diamond-hard point of clarity. The time for reason was over. The time for appeals and bylaws was over. Brenda had trespassed. She had damaged my property. She had committed theft. She had declared war. And I was going to finish it. I didn't yell. I didn't run over to her house. My first move was to pull out my phone. I took photos of everything, from every conceivable angle. The pump in the water. The hose crossing my property line. The water gushing into her yard. I took a video, walking the length of the hose, narrating the date, the time, and what I was looking at. Evidence. Cold, hard, undeniable evidence. Only then did I walk over and unplug the pump. The sudden silence was a relief, but the damage was done. The water was terrifyingly low. I spent the rest of the evening running a garden hose into the pond, trying to replenish some of what was lost. But it was tap water, full of chlorine. It was a temporary fix, a bandage on a gaping wound. The pond's delicate chemical balance was ruined. As I stood there in the dark, watching the water slowly rise, the engineer in my brain took over. My grief was fuel now, powering a cold, logical engine of retaliation. This wasn't going to be a shouting match over a fence. This was going to be a demolition. I was going to take apart her life with the same precision I would use to design a bridge. My first call the next morning was not to the police or a lawyer. It was to Frank. Frank lived 2 doors down. He was a retired land surveyor, a man who had spent 40 years poring over deeds, easements, and property plats. He knew the literal lay of the land better than anyone. He was sharp, curmudgeonly, and had no love for Brenda after she tried to fine him for his satellite dish, which he proved was federally protected. I walked him through what had happened. He listened intently, his bushy gray eyebrows furrowing. When I showed him the pictures, he let out a low whistle. The sheer audacity, he muttered, shaking his head. That's not just an HOA violation, Mark. That's a whole buffet of actual crimes. I know, I said. But I don't want to just file a police report. That's not enough. I want to build a case so airtight, so comprehensive, that she can't wriggle out of it. I want to use the rules, her rules, and the actual law, to bring her down. Frank's eyes lit up with a familiar fire. He loved a good puzzle, especially one that involved putting a petty tyrant in her place. What do you need? Everything you've got on the original property surveys for this whole development, I said. Specifically, I want to know about water rights and drainage easements. He grinned. I've got the original plats in my garage. Let's go digging. We spent the next few hours in his dusty garage, hunched over massive, rolled-up blueprints that smelled of old paper and possibility. Frank's gnarled finger traced the faint blue lines that crisscrossed the properties. There, he said, tapping a spot right between my property and Brenda's. Look at that. It's a designated natural drainage easement. All the runoff from this side of the street is supposed to flow across the back of her lot and into the storm drain on the main road. My mind started spinning, connecting dots. My pond was situated at the highest point of that natural drainage path on my property. So, legally, I mused, water from my property is supposed to flow across hers. In the event of heavy rain, yes, Frank confirmed. It's a legal right-of-way for water. She can't obstruct it. An idea began to form, a beautiful, malicious, and perfectly legal idea. But it was just the seed. I needed more. My investigation widened. I set up a series of high-definition security cameras around my property. They were small, discreet, and had night vision. One was disguised as a rock near the pond. Another was tucked into the eaves of my roof, giving a perfect, wide-angle view of Brenda's backyard, including her swimming pool and the new landscaping project. I started watching the footage every night. It was tedious, but illuminating. I saw the landscapers come and go. I saw Brenda directing them, pointing and gesticulating. And I saw her turn on the pump in my pond a second time, after she must have noticed I'd unplugged it. The camera recorded her marching over, plugging it back in, and giving my house the middle finger before strutting away. It was gold. While the cameras were gathering evidence of her present crimes, I started digging into her past. I spent hours online, scouring public records. I looked up the HOA's tax filings. I looked up the minutes from past board meetings. And then I stumbled upon something interesting. The massive landscaping project in Brenda's yard was being paid for by the HOA. It was buried in the budget under a line item called Common Area Beautification and Erosion Control. The figure was astronomical, $50,000. But her yard wasn't a common area. And the work they were doing had nothing to do with erosion control. It was a high-end, custom-designed garden with a stone patio, an outdoor kitchen, and exotic plants. She was embezzling. She was using HOA funds, our money, to build her own private oasis. And she was using my stolen water to do it. The anger I felt was so cold and pure it was almost calming. This was the linchpin. This elevated the conflict from a neighborhood dispute to a criminal conspiracy. The foundation of her little empire was rotten, and I was about to kick it out from under her. Now, I had a plan. It was multi-phased, technical, and designed for maximum impact. It was, in my humble opinion, a work of art. I called it Operation Poetic Justice. Phase 1 was setting the trap. I drafted a letter. It was a masterpiece of technical jargon and legalese. I sent it via certified mail to every member of the HOA board, including Brenda. In it, I formally documented the unauthorized diversion of water from my property. I cited the specific times and dates, referencing the video evidence I had collected. I noted the damage to my pond's ecosystem and the stress to the aquatic life. Then came the beautiful part. I wrote, "Please be advised that in order to remediate the significant water loss and restore the pre-existing water table levels on my property, I will be undertaking a water reclamation project. This project will utilize the natural, pre-existing drainage easement that runs across Lot 47, her lot, to facilitate the necessary gravitational transfer of water from available sources. All actions will be in full compliance with municipal codes and the established property rights outlined in the original development plat." It was gibberish to a layperson. But to an engineer or a lawyer, it was a clear declaration of intent. I was telling them I was going to take water from her property, and I was giving them the legal justification for it. I knew Brenda would either not understand it or dismiss it as the ramblings of a crank. Her arrogance was her greatest weakness, and I was counting on it. I gave them a 10-day period to respond or contest my planned reclamation project. Of course, I received no response. 10 days passed in silence. The landscapers in her yard finished their work. Her new garden was immaculate. Her large, in-ground swimming pool shimmered in the sunlight, full to the brim. While I waited, I gathered my equipment. I purchased a high-capacity, silent-running submersible pump. I bought several hundred feet of flexible but durable 3-inch pipe. I went to the city planning office and got a copy of the official survey map showing the drainage easement, just to have it stamped and certified. I was building my arsenal. The next HOA meeting was my chosen stage for the first reveal. I put my name on the agenda under New Business. When my turn came, I walked to the front of the room with a calm that felt almost unnatural. I had my laptop with me. "Good evening," I began, my voice steady. "I'd like to discuss a serious issue of property damage and theft that has occurred in our community." I connected my laptop to the projector. The first image that flashed on the screen was a crystal-clear photo of the sump pump in my pond. A few people in the audience gasped. I clicked to the next slide. A video began to play. It was the footage from my security camera, showing Brenda marching onto my property, plugging the pump back in, and flipping off my house. The collective intake of breath in the room was audible. Brenda's face, which had been a mask of smug authority, turned a blotchy, furious red. "This is an invasion of my privacy," she screeched, jumping to her feet. "You've been spying on me. This is illegal." "My camera is on my own property, Brenda," I said calmly, not taking my eyes off the audience. "It's recording my own backyard. You just happen to be in it, committing a crime." I continued my presentation. I showed the photos of the drained pond, the stressed fish. I showed the certified letter I had sent to the board, and I showed the signed receipt proving Brenda had received it. "As you can see," I said, "the board was notified of this issue 10 days ago and chose not to respond." The other board members squirmed in their seats, refusing to make eye contact. They were complicit through their inaction, and they knew it. Brenda launched into a tirade. It was a whirlwind of denial, accusations, and self-righteous indignation. "He's a liar. That pond is a disgusting hazard. I was performing a community service by abating a nuisance. He's the one who should be fined. He threatened me." Her hysteria was her undoing. The more she yelled, the more guilty she looked. The calm, factual evidence I presented stood in stark contrast to her unhinged ranting. She wasn't just losing the argument, she was losing her credibility, right there in front of the entire community. The meeting ended without a resolution, but the damage was done. The seeds of doubt had been sown. Neighbors who had once avoided me now gave me small, encouraging nods. They had seen the Empress with no clothes, and it was not a pretty sight. I knew what would come next. A cornered animal is a dangerous one. Brenda, stripped of her public authority, would resort to more vicious, personal attacks. I was ready for it. Her retaliation was swift and ugly. The very next day, a police car pulled into my driveway. 2 officers came to my door, looking grim. "Sir, we've received a complaint that you threatened your neighbor, a Ms. Brenda Miller," the older officer said. I invited them in and offered them coffee. I calmly explained the situation and showed them the same video I had shown at the meeting. I also showed them the footage of her trespassing, which I had conveniently queued up. "She filed this report this morning," I told them, less than 12 hours after I presented this evidence of her crimes to the HOA. "This isn't a legitimate complaint. It's witness intimidation." The officers watched the videos, their expressions hardening. They recognized the tactic for what it was. They apologized for taking my time and left. I made sure to get a copy of the police report, noting it was unfounded. Another piece of paper for my file. Next, she took the fight to the community Facebook group. She wrote a long, rambling post filled with lies. She claimed I was a disturbed and aggressive individual, that I was stalking her, and that she feared for her safety. She painted herself as the victim, a dedicated community servant being harassed by a dangerous malcontent. But her credibility was already shot. My quiet, factual presentation at the meeting had armed my neighbors with the truth. The comments on her post were not what she expected. "Brenda, we all saw the video of you on his property. Why was your landscaper using water from his pond? Maybe we should be talking about that $50,000 for erosion control from the last budget meeting." The tide was turning. Her own social media post had become a forum for people to air their own grievances against her. Her smear campaign had backfired spectacularly. Her final, desperate move was an attempt to attack my livelihood. She filed a formal complaint with the State Professional Engineering Board, accusing me of unethical conduct, and using my skills to intimidate the community. It was a baseless, ridiculous claim, but it was serious. An investigation by the licensing board could tarnish my reputation, even if I was cleared. This was the final escalation. She had tried to destroy my property, my reputation, and now my career. There were no more lines for her to cross. And that's when the universe sent me an angel. Or, more accurately, an accomplice. I received an anonymous email one night. The subject line was simply, "Brenda." The email read, "I saw the post on the Willow Creek Facebook page. I'm her brother. I know what she's capable of. She's been a cheat and a bully her whole life. If you're serious about stopping her, I can help you. She's not just a petty tyrant. She's a criminal. She did the same thing at her last company, embezzling funds until she was quietly forced to resign." My heart hammered in my chest. This was it. The whistleblower. The final piece of the puzzle. I replied cautiously, and we began a careful correspondence. His name was David. He was deeply ashamed of his sister's behavior and tired of seeing her leave a wake of destruction wherever she went. He had documentation. Bank statements. Forged invoices. Emails. He had a treasure trove of evidence showing a long pattern of financial fraud, with the HOA being just her latest victim. He agreed to give me everything on the condition of anonymity until it was absolutely necessary. He FedExed a drive to my office. When I opened the files, I knew I had her. It was a complete, detailed roadmap of her financial crimes. Armed with my own extensive documentation of her harassment, theft, and property damage, and now David's irrefutable proof of felony embezzlement, I made an appointment with the district attorney's office. I laid out the entire story for a sharp, no-nonsense assistant DA named Ms. Chen. I didn't editorialize. I just presented the evidence, timeline by timeline, document by document, video by video. She listened patiently, her expression growing more and more grim. When I was finished, she looked at the mountain of evidence on her desk, then back at me. Mr. Miller, she said slowly, has done more than just commit a few crimes. She's been running this HOA like a personal fiefdom and funding it like a personal bank account. She told me they would open a full investigation immediately. The evidence was more than enough to secure warrants. She asked for my continued cooperation and my patience. The wheels of justice were turning. But I had one more thing to do. The legal system would handle her crimes, but I had a promise to keep to myself. A promise of poetic justice. Using the HOA bylaws, I collected signatures from my now supportive neighbors to call a special emergency meeting. The stated purpose on the notice was a vote of no confidence in the current HOA president and a full financial audit. It was set for the following Tuesday evening. I also made a quiet call to a reporter at the local news station who had a reputation for covering suburban corruption. I told him there was a story brewing in Willow Creek that he wouldn't want to miss. The night of the meeting, the clubhouse was packed. It was standing room only. The air was thick with tension and anticipation. Brenda was there, looking pale but defiant, flanked by her two neutered board members. She clearly thought she could weather this storm, that she could bully her way out of it as she always had. The local news van was parked discreetly outside. And sitting in the back row, dressed in casual clothes and looking for all the world like a pair of disgruntled homeowners, were two detectives from the DA's white-collar crime unit. Miss Chen had given me a heads up. They were there to observe. I was the first to speak. I walked to the podium, not with a laptop this time, but with a single piece of paper in my hand. It was the certified survey map. I won't rehash the events of the last few weeks, I began, my voice carrying through the silent room. Most of you have seen the videos. You know that our HOA president trespassed on my property and stole my water to facilitate a landscaping project at her home. I held up the map. What you may not know is how that project was funded. And then, I laid it all out. I didn't have a slideshow, just the cold, hard numbers from David's files. I read out the line item for erosion control. I read out the invoices from the landscaping company, invoices that were addressed to Brenda personally but paid with checks from the HOA's account. I detailed how she had systematically inflated the costs of routine community maintenance, pool cleaning, lawn care, tree trimming, and skimmed the difference for years. With every sentence, the color drained further from Brenda's face. The whispers in the room grew to a low roar. It all adds up, I concluded, to over $120,000. Stolen. From all of us. The room erupted. People were shouting, pointing, demanding answers. And that's when Brenda completely and utterly melted down. It was a spectacle of pure, narcissistic rage. She leaped to her feet, her face contorted into a mask of fury. Lies. All of it. He's a monster, he's been obsessed with me, he's trying to ruin me. She turned on the crowd, her voice a piercing shriek. I run this community. I keep your property values high. I do all the work, I attend all the boring meetings, I deal with all of your petty complaints. That money was for my time. For my hard work. I deserved it. You are all so ungrateful. It was a confession, screamed at the top of her lungs in a room full of witnesses, a news camera, and two detectives. It was beautiful. As if on cue, the two detectives in the back row stood up. They calmly made their way through the shocked crowd. One of them held up his badge. "Brenda Miller," he said, his voice cutting through the chaos. "You're under arrest for grand larceny and embezzlement." The look on her face was a priceless mixture of shock, disbelief, and sputtering rage. She tried to pull away as the second detective put her hands behind her back. The click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound in the room. The entire community watched in stunned silence as she was led out of the clubhouse. Just as she reached the door, she twisted around, her eyes locking on mine. The hatred in them was a physical force. "You'll pay for this," she screeched, her voice cracking. "I'll sue you for everything you have. This isn't over." It was the last, hollow threat of a queen being dragged from her castle. It was pathetic. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that it was over. The aftermath was swift and decisive. The story was the lead on the 10 o'clock news. Brenda's mugshot was plastered everywhere. The 2 other board members resigned in disgrace the next day. An interim board was formed, made up of reasonable people, including my friend Frank. They immediately began the process of a full, independent audit to reclaim the stolen funds. Brenda's case moved through the legal system. With the mountain of evidence against her, including her own public confession, her lawyer advised her to take a plea deal. She was convicted on multiple felony counts. Her sentence was severe. She was ordered to pay full restitution to the HOA, which completely wiped her out financially. Her beautiful, ill-gotten house had to be sold. And she was sentenced to 5 to 7 years in a state prison. The day she was led away in a prison jumpsuit, the reign of the HOA tyrant of Willow Creek officially ended. The community began to heal. The oppressive atmosphere of fear and suspicion lifted like a fog. People started talking to each other again. The ridiculous, petty rules she had instituted were systematically dismantled. A sense of real community, one based on mutual respect rather than intimidation, began to grow in its place. I became something of a reluctant local hero, but I deflected the praise. I hadn't done it for them, not really. I had done it for Elena. I had done it for the quiet sanctuary she had built. Which brought me to the final phase of my plan. Operation Poetic Justice wasn't complete until the pond was whole again. Brenda's house sat empty for a few weeks before the bank officially took possession. The power was shut off. The lawn started to grow shaggy. And the big, beautiful swimming pool she had cherished so much began to turn a sickly shade of green as the filter system sat idle. The water was still there, though. Thousands and thousands of gallons of it. On a quiet Saturday morning, I put the final piece of my plan into motion. I consulted the certified survey map one last time. I had the legal right to use the drainage easement. My certified letter to the old HOA board, notifying them of my intent to undertake a water reclamation project, had gone uncontested. Legally, I was in the clear. I wheeled my silent, submersible pump to the back fence. I ran the long, flexible pipe from my pond, across my yard, and under the fence, laying it perfectly along the path of the natural drainage easement on her property. Then, under the cover of a large azalea bush, I dropped the pump into the shallow end of her neglected, algae-filled pool. I ran the extension cord back to my outlet, took a deep, satisfying breath, and plugged it in. The pump hummed to life, almost silently. A moment later, a thick, steady stream of greenish water began to pour into my pond. Her water. It was perfect. I wasn't just refilling my pond, I was draining her monument to vanity. I was using the very water feature she was so proud of to restore the one she tried to destroy. The irony was so thick I could taste it. Which brings us back to the beginning. I stood there for a long time, just watching. It was a slow process, a quiet transfer of power, of justice. That's when her voice, the shriek that started it all, echoed from her front yard. She must have been there with a realtor or a bank agent. She must have seen the pipe. "You have 5 minutes to shut that pump off, or I'm calling the police for grand theft water." I finally turned, a slow, calm smile spreading across my face. I saw her standing on her newly laid patio, her face a mask of apoplectic rage. She was pointing a trembling finger at me. I just held up my phone, which was already recording. "Go ahead, Brenda," I called back, my voice calm and clear. "Call them. I've been waiting to show them this certified drainage easement and my uncontested reclamation notice. It's a civil matter, and I'm well within my rights. Besides, I added, unable to resist, I believe the legal term is repossession, not theft. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish, but no sound came out. She knew she was beaten. She had no power, no authority, no legal leg to stand on. She was just a woman standing in a yard she no longer owned, watching her swimming pool get drained to fix a problem she had created. She let out a final, frustrated scream and stormed away. I never saw her again. I let the pump run all weekend. By Sunday evening, my pond was full again, shimmering under the setting sun. The waterfall was flowing, its gentle music filling the air. Her pool was a sad, nearly empty concrete basin with a green bathtub ring around the edge. It took a few weeks and some careful work with water treatments and new filters to restore the pond's ecosystem, but it recovered. The koi, resilient as ever, swam happily in their refurbished home. I sit out here now, by the water, just as I did in the depths of my grief. But something is different. The peace I feel is no longer tinged with sadness. It's a stronger, more resilient peace. A peace that I fought for. This pond is still my wife's legacy, a testament to her love of life and beauty. But now, it's also a monument to something else. It's a reminder that bullies only have the power you give them, that the truth is a powerful weapon, and that sometimes, the most satisfying justice isn't just about winning. It's about the poetry of how you win. Standing up to a tyrant can be a terrifying thing, but letting them run roughshod over your life is always worse. The whole ordeal taught me that a good plan, meticulously executed, is better than any shouting match. And that sometimes, the best way to solve a problem with your neighbor is with a little bit of applied hydrology. What do you think? Was it the perfect revenge? Let me know in the comments. And if you want to hear more stories about bullies getting what's coming to them, make sure to subscribe. You never know when you might need a little inspiration for your own Operation Poetic Justice.